Hello again, driving home, thinking about biblical parenting. Some of you know that I became a parent only a couple weeks ago, almost 6 weeks ago now. Been thinking a lot about what it means to be a biblical parent in a world where there is so much information about what are the right practices of parenting. I was just talking with one of my childhood friends who just had his first baby. He and his wife had their first baby, and we're just talking about all the different things that people tell you about how to do parenting right. And I'm sure there's some wisdom to all these things, right? Like whether you should co-sleep or not, sleeping on their belly, or feeding them formula or breast milk, or all these sorts of things. I'm sure if any of you are parents, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I also wonder if there is too much focus on these things and not enough focus on a trust that God can take care of your child regardless of how you parent them. Obviously there's space for wisdom, right? Like you should take the best available resources and use them to the best of your ability. That's good Christian stewardship. But on the other hand, like how do you regard the result of doing the best possible thing? Do you feel like if I do this, then my child will be good? If I do this, then my child will be right? If I do this, well, then I feel better about myself as a parent. If those are your motivations, you're probably looking in the wrong place, right? Like that's pragmatic works righteousness, to be very blunt about it. To think that my works, what I can do, what I can figure out, is what justifies me, what makes me good enough, what makes my kids good enough, right? I mean, anything other than a trust that as I do the best that I can, given the resources that God has allowed into my life, that as I do that, I trust that God will do what is right for my child. It's frankly a sin. And I'm not saying I got this down. Like my wife and I, we struggle with whether to do this thing or that thing. We struggle with like the emotional baggage that comes with that. Like, are we ruining our baby? But the constant reminder needs to be, this is God's child before it is my child. It's God's choice to give me this child, not my own. You know, we live in a society that is more or less on demand when it comes to bearing children, right? You know, we can have birth control, and condoms, and these sorts of things that allow us to delay children in our marriage, which is a whole nother topic. And then if we don't want a child that is conceived, we can abort it. And so when we actually have children, we start to think it's my work, my responsibility, my child. I chose to bring this child into the world. It was my will. And then all the pressure falls squarely on us to pull it off when it comes to having children. Or maybe if we had a biblical worldview when it comes to having children, that God gives children when and where He pleases, and that He does it as a blessing to His children. Think of the Psalms, right? Then I don't have an attitude of, I need to be everything this child needs. I am simply the caretaker of this child that God has chosen in His will to bring into the world. And whether this child lives or dies, whether they're healthy or sick, frankly, whether they're saved or not, is up to God, at least insofar as we understand the doctrine of election, right? It takes a lot of the pressure off when you start remembering that it's actually God's child first and foremost, and that, you know, no matter how good of a father or a mother you actually think you are, or maybe are, if you know all the research, God is a far better father than you will ever be, and that He's the one that ultimately controls those things. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know all the right things to do for your children, but I will say your Father in heaven does, and He is not short on time to take care of those things for your son or your daughter. So those of you who have kids and you're struggling with, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things? It's not that you should stop thinking about those things or striving for the best, but maybe let the pressure off a little bit and remember that your God loves your daughter or son more than you do, and is far more capable of taking care of it than you are.